Assalamu alaikum. This is Ahmed from CARE New York. I'm the litigation director, and I want to welcome you today to our CARE talk on the census and how everyone can complete the census, why they should be doing the census, especially during the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic here in New York and around the country and around the globe. We're very excited to have our esteemed panel here of guests from Engage and from APNA Brooklyn community. We have Sister Asia Abadi from Engage and Sister Iram Hanif from APNA Brooklyn community. Before we kind of get started to talk about the census and how that's gonna kind of gone virtual, I wanted to give each of our panelists an opportunity to really introduce themselves, introduce their organization and the work that they do. Sister Asia, if you want to.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name's Asia. I'm the New York Census Director for Engage. We're the largest national nonprofit focused on Muslim civic engagement. And we work to really develop Muslim leadership and organization around civic engagement and advocating within the community. And obviously along those lines, the census is a really important part of our advocacy efforts, as well as helping the community understand what sort of supports the government can do and what we need to encourage them to do. Understand, what sort of supports the government can do and what organization around civic engagement and advocating.
That was so good. We had to hear it twice.
I can hear the time delay too.
Yeah.
Sister Iram, if you want to introduce yourself.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hi, my name is Iram Hanif. I am the CEO of APNA Brooklyn Community Center. We are a Brooklyn-based organization. As the name says, we are a community-based organization. Our mission is to educate, engage, and empower our community members. Mostly the South Asian community members are our constituents, and we help in terms of helping them in navigating the government social service system. So whether it comes to entitlement, whether it comes to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, disability, food stamps, we do all those entitlement services, case management services, and there is a bunch of other services with respect to voter registration and civic engagement, which we are doing in partnership with other community-based organizations and city agencies.
Great. Well, thank you both for being on here today, for making the time to do this. I also want to welcome all of our attendees who are listening and watching us right now via Zoom, and of course, all of the attendees and participants on Facebook Live. For everyone who's watching, if you have a question or a comment, please write it down in the comment section. And we have one of my colleagues, Fred, who will relay that information to us, and we will do our best to answer the questions during this live presentation. I also want to recognize that all of us are practicing social distancing right now. It's really important that we take this pandemic seriously, that we maintain distance. All the CARE New York staff are working remote. All of us here today are at home broadcasting this. And so we hope that all of our listeners are also practicing social distancing, maintaining good practices, but at the same time, remaining active and remaining active civically, as we hope that you will do moving forward, is extremely important. As everybody knows, CARE New York stands for the Council on American Islamic Relations. We are the New York chapter. We've been around for 20 plus years, and we are a civil rights and Muslim organization dedicated to protecting the civil rights of American Muslims in New York and around the country. So let's go ahead and get started. And the very first question is extremely important. What is the census, and why should we even care about it? Sister Asia, if you want to get us started.
Sure. So the census is an opportunity every 10 years. It's constitutionally mandated to give a snapshot, a picture of who lives in America and how many and where they live. And it's a significant, important piece of sort of the picture. And so what we learned, in 2016 and 2018 elections, we recognize that voting matters and those elections have consequences. Well, the census is very similar to elections. Being counted in the census matters, and the census has consequences, real consequences for all of our communities. The census is utilized by the government to allocate $670 billion of federal funding to decide how much each state gets and each city. It is also, and that includes everything from infrastructure that we all use, like bridges and subways, to both school funding and SNAP benefits, as well as it's also utilized by businesses to better understand where communities and growth and changes, so that they can decide sort of where banks will put new banks, as well as where Starbucks will put a new spot. So it's used both by the private sector and the public sector. And finally, it's a big part of deciding representation at the federal level, but also at the state and city level. So for example, after the census is done, there is a reallocation and a redistricting of communities to have representation for Congress. And then that happens both throughout the state and city level.
That is a lot, and that's very important. Not only is it important for the government to know, where everybody lives in terms of, size, but businesses use it on deciding where to locate their businesses. That's extremely important. So if you like nice cafes, if you like nice grocery stores and restaurants, you want to make sure that you're doing the census. That's what it sounds like to me. So, Iram, can you kind of tell us a little bit about what your organization was doing before this COVID-19 pandemic started, and how that has kind of changed the landscape that you're working with right now?
So as Asia said, that census is very critical and important for all the communities. So APNA is also part of 2020 census campaign. We are the city partner, and before the COVID situation, we were doing outreach in the community. We have hosted job and recruitment sessions in our center. We have hosted teaching sessions. We have hosted info sessions for our community members. And luckily, soon before the COVID-19 situation, the second day when the census was launched, March 12, March 13, we were able to host our first pop-up center of census, and we have completed, helped many community members in completing their census form. But during this COVID situation, it's a little more challenging and more difficult for us in terms of managing and continuing all the census activities as we have planned initially. So we have to postpone many of our coming, like March and April, all the events, just because of this whole pandemic.
Okay, so can you kind of tell us a little bit, what's a pop-up center?
So the pop-up center is basically a center where we have a restricted time available for all the seniors, all the members of the communities to come visit our center, and we'll give them the free access to the internet, as well as we'll have federal census representatives and the team of APNA volunteers and census workers, those who will help you out in filling out your census forms. It could be an online census form you want assistance to fill it out, or it could be starting your call with the Census Bureau so that you can complete your census questionnaire.
That sounds important. Okay, so let's do this real quick. I want to talk about how people can do the census now that they can't go to your pop-up center or to your offices, or you can't visit them at their homes to assist them. But before we do that, let's go over the actual census, right? Let's go over each question. Let's talk about it and kind of describe it and explain the importance of each question. And Engage has been so kind to create a PowerPoint for us, which I'm going to share with everyone really quickly. Just give me 1 sec as I share my screen. Okay, why isn't this working? Hey, let's see, is this it? Can you guys see?
Yep.
All right.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Sorry about a little
No
technical
worries.
difficulties. Obviously, as an attorney, my my skill set is not my technical aspect. Let's see here. Okay, let's go with. I guess before we do that, Sister Asya, can you kind of give us a little bit about the dates? I see a PowerPoint.
Yeah. So, Census Day, official Census Day is April 1st. That is the day we're supposed to count everybody in America. But you can actually, during the self-response period, respond beforehand. The first mailing went out between March 12th to 20th. So everyone should have received their first letter inviting them to participate in the census. And at that time, you can actually fill out the census based on who you anticipate being in your home on April 1st. So for example, if you are expecting a baby to be born on April 10th, you can't really count them. But if you have a child born in March, you can. So in that way. So, if you normally would have family living there on April 1st. And then there is a series of other reminder letters that are being sent out to remind us to participate. And, though we are all self-isolating, the one benefit is this is the first time ever that the census is going to be able to participate online. So we can actually just go on any website, any computer, and go onto the website and fill out our census form, and do so now. Through actually the self-response period has been extended through mid-August. So we are really encouraging people to do so in the high peak times of April and May.
And just so since we're all Muslim organizations, I know April 3rd is Muslim Census Day. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So
yes.
We have on that day and get hundreds of thousands of families and households, inshallah, to fill out their census either right now or they can do it on April 3rd or anytime in between then. You said all the way to mid-August.
Yeah, but we're encouraging self-response now. And one thing I'll mention, April 3rd was chosen because it was Jummah. We were hoping to do Jummah khutbahs related to that, but because of the COVID-19 situation, we're not doing that. So in the interim, Iram and I just were on a national call with other Muslim organizations where we're encouraging people to use social media, to tweet, to post, to text their family and friends on April 3rd, make videos to really encourage people that this is really, really important and we need to all participate.
Is there a hashtag that's being used for that?
Muslim census, Muslims count 2020, right?
Muslims count 2020.
Yeah.
Tag Muslims count 2020.
Yes.
Use it and tag all of us so we can commission the census.
Great.
So
yeah.
You go ahead.
So this is actually screenshots of the paper form, which will be sent out. It was supposed to be sent out at the end of April. I'm not sure if that timeline is delayed a little bit, but it is. And the questions are exactly the same on the online form. They're just formatted a little differently, but I could screenshot this paper form. So there's a first set of 4 questions for a household. You can go ahead and advance, Amit. So the first question is, how many people are living and staying in this house on April 1st? The second question is, are there any other people that live or stay here on April 1st that are not included in the first question? And I guess that is brought up, like, for example, right now we have a lot of college students that were sent home and they may be staying there right now, but technically they live somewhere else. What the U.S. Census Bureau is asking them to do is to be not counted at their parents' house because they will be counting them at the university, because that's normally where they would be on April 1st, technically.
I have a question for both of you. So let's say that in New York, everybody has roommates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, right? But I have a roommate. Our listeners may have roommates. Do I need to fill out a census form myself and only count myself? My roommate does their own census form, or do we do one together?
You can do one together. You can fill it out for them. In New York, we have a lot of families that live in shared living situations, like multiple families have even illegal shares of apartments. It's really important to understand in New York City, for sure, the city is saying that the census numbers are not going to be given to anybody. So even if you're an illegal share, if you're in a situation where we have a lot of people that just share mattresses, right? They all have rotating times that they're in the house. We just want to count everybody who's there because we want to know who's there so that we can utilize that to get our federal funding from anyway. So, so the question is, you could do it for yourself and your roommate if you think your roommate may not get to it.
Yeah. And then one thing more I want to add here is the Federal Census Bureau says that everyone where you spend your majority of your time where you live and sleep. So in case of roommates, if they are just with you and they're spending most of their time in that particular home, then they should be counted over there. For in case of a college students, those who are right now here or maybe here on April 1st, but majority of the time they live in their college campuses. So they should be counted in college campuses.
Okay. That's good to know. I think especially now since a lot of colleges have closed shop and people are back with their families. That's really, it's not, it's where you spend the majority of your time throughout the year and not necessarily where you're counted as, I guess, a resident.
Yes. Yeah. And Brother Emmett, let me just mention the next couple of questions. I always like to explain why those questions are important. So for the third question, actually, if you can scroll back down, is this house or scroll back up. Question number 3, is this house or apartment or mobile home, is it owned or is it rented? I think people might be curious why that's important to the federal government. I think that gives the federal government a real understanding about if, for example, in certain communities, people previously could buy property and now they can't or they don't own. It gives a sense for, if are there rising house prices and how people are doing, because in America, most people's biggest retirement vehicle is their purchasing of a home. So that's why that's important. And then the fourth question is your telephone number. I know people may feel a little bit odd about writing their phone number there, but that is only if the Census Bureau has a question about your response. And I would say to you, that was sort of when we had paper questionnaires and people were writing quickly, perhaps there was something, they didn't understand or illegible writing, so they would have the number to call back. The hope is now that we're doing it online, there's less chance for I can't say that word. Well, it's less chance for sloppy handwriting. They will highly unlikely to call you, and definitely for sure if you do the online response.
Let me ask, if someone doesn't fill out one of these questions, like the phone number, right? Because normally when I go online and I fill something out and they ask for my phone number, I just skip it.
Yeah. So you and I can say this. So yes. We're supposed to encourage you that this is a federal requirement and you should fill out the entire form as much as you can. But the reality is if you don't fill out a portion of it, they could call you and ask you to answer those questions or come back to your doorway. But in previous years, they have counted, I have heard as low as 50 or 60% of the questionnaire questions as fully answered.
Okay, so you both, and Iram, you can step in and correct me, but both of you are obviously recommend that you answer every question.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And if you don't, it seems like there is a risk, at least. It might be a low risk, but there's a risk that if you don't answer certain questions, that your census ballot may not count.
So they may come back, they'll follow up with you. The enumerator will come knocking on your door. And the thing is, the reality is that given there are fewer enumerators and the reality of the situation, if they, how likely is that to happen? There is a risk for that. And we want to encourage people to fill out as much as possible online and beforehand. So.
Okay.
And now there's a set of 7 questions that are for each person who lives in the household. It's your name. And for that person, do they usually live or stay somewhere else? How are they related to each other? So if it's like a multi-generational household, if it's married or roommates that are not related by marriage. Number 4 is the sex. 5 is age, and I bring up age because it's a great way for our community to really show the population in the community. So for example, if we have rising older adult seniors in a community of a Muslim community, like we can make a point to advocate for different services. And then also it's really important to show like younger children. Historically, children under 5 were undercounted, because I could see this as a parent. By the time you filled it out for yourself, your husband, one child, by the time you get to the second or third child, you probably have run out of time. But the point is that children under 5 are undercounted, and that is how community estimates the growth and needs for schools, elementary schools and middle schools for the next 10 years. So it's really important to make sure you fill out the form for every person in the household.
Well, I'll also add this. I know with Care New York and other organizations, these census numbers are really important when we're trying to decide what type of services to create for our community, those services. We're seeking funding from grants or foundations. They want to know how big is the community that you're about to service, unless we go out and do our own census.
Exactly. So question number 6 and 7 are on race, are so important for our community because it allows us to advocate. 6 is for Hispanic, if you're of Hispanic, and number 7 is the race question. And I've given examples of the fact is that you can check as many spots that you feel that you fit in. It's self-reported, so it's no one's going to come say, you said you're American Indian, but you're really not. How do you prove it? It's really self-reported. And the biggest thing for our community is that there is no question about your faith. So there's no question if you're Muslim, Christian, but the only way for us to make estimates on the size of our community is by putting the race question and making sure people write in if they're Egyptian, if they're Somali, if they're Syrian, if they're Pakistani, Bangladeshi. That is the way we make a case for our growing community and make the case for services.
So let me ask a question for both of you here. Sister Iram, you can step in. So I'm looking at the race question, and it says under white, and it gives the example of Egyptian, right? Let's say I'm Egyptian. Do you recommend for your community members to check off white and then write Egyptian, or are you recommending that they go to some other race that's at the bottom and write Egyptian?
Okay, so I would recommend if it's as Asia said, it's completely self-driven, how you wanna consider yourself. If you think you consider yourself as white, and then you can fill out as Egyptian. But as I'm representing the South Asian community, so I would suggest my community to check on the other Asian category and specifically mention your country of origin, like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and neighboring countries, so that we'll have accurate count of the people coming from those countries, the immigrants from those particular countries. That will be more, accurate and correct data. Because right now, we all know that city level, state level, or federal level, our numbers are not corrected. So the only way they can figure it out, as Asia said, there is no question regarding your faith. It's basically by origin of your country origin. So that's the only way they can figure it out. Okay, so most of the people coming from India, Pakistan, Egypt, or Iranian background, or some other country, so they are predominantly Muslims, right? So that's the only way they can figure it out and make changes into the whole whole system in terms of bringing the resources at the federal level, state level, and on city level, and borough-wide as well. So which school has more population of the Muslim kids, which school has more population of some other ethnicities, or which areas have high Muslim seniors available. So meaning that there is a need of providing halal food for the seniors, things like that.
Those are all very important. Sister Asia, for your particular community that Engage works for and services, is there a particular box that you're recommending?
So what I've said similar to this point, because I do work with both, like, the Arab population as well as the African American community also. And I think that the point, it is very self-reported. And what I say to people is, if it bothers you so much to check the white box because you don't feel connected to it, you can put it under some other race, but make sure you write in that you're Syrian or Yemeni, right? Because the reality is what's going to happen is, through the system that they have in data, it's still going to pull into white, but at least we'll have data that we can pull out that says Yemeni and Syrian, and we can make the case for how large the Arab population is here in America. And so the biggest point is that, if it makes you feel that you can respond to that, do so. And one last thing I'll mention, just because I think this sometimes gets what I had heard from folks is like, for example, Somali community feels more connected to the Arab community, and it really was hard for them to feel that they felt connected to be under the Black mark too, in similar way, right? And so what I had worked with a woman who is actively engaging the Black community around the census, and her point is that a lot of civil rights laws and a lot of litigation that protects communities is through the race data. And if we don't have the data in the accurate place, the reality is people may not be giving you jobs. There might be over policing in your communities, and we use that data to make the case to show that. And so even if we need to know that you're part of that where you fit in, and some of this race data, these race categories are old and they haven't really caught up to the way the community is. But once we have the data, we can still advocate for 2030 to have a Muslim Amina category, right? And so this is what we have now. Let's work towards getting it as accurate as possible and move towards changing it for 2030.
Absolutely. We hope that both of you and CARE will fight for that new category to get added.
Yes, definitely.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Okay. Are there any other questions you wanted to go through on the census questionnaire?
I just wanted to mention that the fact that this data on race, like Iram sort of hinted at, was the whole the fact that this is used by our communities to better serve our community. So providing halal lunches at schools, at senior centers. It was used by our community in New York City to advocate for Eid holidays, and that is being replicated across the country. They're using that data that they can. So really, the more data we have, the more numbers we have, where we can make sure that the government provides services in a way they should.
Yeah. So here I want to add one simple example. Like, let's suppose, because how the Federal Census Bureau is working, it's like in every neighborhood they have it's called the Census Tract. So basically on the Census Tract, they are tracking how many people living in that particular neighborhood in particular area, and depending upon how many people fill out the surveys, they allocate all the resources. So just an example. So in the census data, if all the families have not completed the census form, they showed up that in one particular tract, there are only 100 students. The reality is that the school might have 150 students actually, or 200 students. So the city or the state level, the school will get only the resources to serve those 100 students. But there are actually 150 or 200 students. So at the end of the day, the school has been compromised just because of the census data, and they have limited resources available, and they have to adjust the need of all those additional students. So this is how much critical the census data is. And same goes for our hospitals, for our parks, for other transportation, our roads, our bridges, everything is depending on this data.
It sounds like both of you are saying that if we want funding for our services, our communities, we need to do the census.
This is the right time.
Yeah, that's great. And Ahmed, there is one slide on the citizenship question. We just wanted to mention that because it seems like people still think that there is a citizenship question on the census. I've heard as high as numbers of 33%. There is no citizenship question. It is not going to be on the 2020 census. It is not on it. So just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah.
That actually takes us to what I wanted to talk about next, which is, with the Trump administration, their whole attempt to get the census question added has kind of caused a lot of fear and concern from Muslim communities, immigrant communities, undocumented communities. And that's kind of where I want to go and focus on for a couple of minutes on, should the Muslim community be concerned when they are filling out the census?
Okay, so I would like to say here that as for the Federal Bureau, there is an Article 13. So Article 13 of the code ensures the confidentiality of the data, and all the federal staff have taken a lifetime oath in terms of complying with Article 13. So if anybody is not complying that, it means that they will have litigations against them. So this federal level, they have mandated it that the census data will not be shared with even any law enforcement agency. They are not allowed to do so. They are not allowed to share it with ICE or any other federal or state or city level agencies. So this is the confidentiality of the data. Article 13 secures the confidentiality. So that's why I would say the Muslim New Yorkers will not have any fear of being their data being shared with any other regulatory authorities or any agencies.
Yeah, and I would add on to that is the fact that Article 13 was initiated in the early 1950s after the census was used to intern the Japanese community. And the federal government realized that they never wanted to ever risk doing that again because the census was so important to how the federal government does its business that they wanted to make sure that census data was secure and would never be used to individually identify people. So Article 13 was enacted, and it even includes GPS coordinates, and you cannot give like data to that level. And the last bit I would add is that census tracts are quite large. They're not just a block, it's quite like much bigger than you would think so. So it's really hard to identify one single individual within that census tract because the data is pulled up in aggregate as a group, right? As a percentage of the population. Ahmed, I think you're muted.
I want to be clear. What I was saying is that I want to just inform all the viewers that when we're saying Article 13, we're referring to a federal law that has been passed by Congress. As Sister just mentioned, it was passed back in the 1950s after the Japanese internment, where the census at that point was used. And so now there is a confidentiality clause that's worked into federal law that prohibits the census from sharing information with other agencies, aside from just regular data that Sister Badi just mentioned. Okay, so I want to go to the technical aspects of how the census is being done and the changes that we're seeing now with the COVID-19. So let me say this, how are each of you promoting the census today? How are you telling your community members to complete the census?
Okay, so I can start it. As an organization, what we are doing is we are doing more our outreach through social media. We have started text out the count, which was the day in the last weekend, where we have sent text messages to thousands of our community members, informing them that still they can still complete their census form completed. The second is we are working on in terms of starting virtual pop-up center. It means that our organization will have a designated time where our census staff will be working. You can reach out to us and we'll help you filling out your census form. So we are somewhere remotely sitting, but we are assisting you in terms of completing your form. And if you need help in terms of dialing the Census Bureau's number, we can dial your number, and there are 13 languages. In those languages, the full complete census website is available, and we'll assist you to navigate the website. And this is what we are doing digitally and on social media.
Okay, let me follow up with a couple of questions. You said you're doing outreach on social media. What is your handle? How can people go and see that outreach? Okay, so they can go on Apna Brooklyn Community Center Facebook page. Right now, we are just doing from Facebook. We are trying to build up our all other channels, and then shortly they will see there's already information about the center number. They can directly reach out to us at 718-648-4300 if they need any help. And then moving forward, we'll have more upcoming programs posted on our social media pages. How can they sign up for your text messages? How can they sign up for your virtual pop-up center? So for the text messages, they can sign up by calling us, or maybe by putting a comment on our social media page. Our staff member will reach out to them. And for the virtual pop-up centers, probably after this weekend, they will have all the details about how they can get the help to get the services from the virtual pop-up center. Sister Asya, how are you promoting the census for your organization, and how can they reach, how can they get connected with Engage?
So Engage is planning the next 2 weeks to do a social media sort of storm on the census. So we'll both be on Twitter as well as Facebook with information. We're planning to do short videos with different community members that will be posted online. So just really encouraging people to post their own stories and maybe tag us so that we can amplify and retweet, because we are a national organization, but we are all 1/5 of American Muslims are in New York. So we really want to encourage everybody to reach out to everyone they know so that we can hopefully connect to all the Muslims in America. And webinars like this and really just sort of supporting the community in ways that we can do, we're trying to do as much as possible.
And how can they get in touch with you if they want help in you to do the census, for instance?
They're welcome to come on to Engage's Facebook page or Twitter page and ask us. We can help see if we can connect them. There's also a group of Muslim organizations that are starting to collaborate nationally. I know CARE is part of that, and UPNA. So we're planning that Muslim Day of Action on April 3rd. So if you are locally, we can definitely connect you to different organizations that are here locally, but also if you are somewhere else in the nation, we can find somebody else in your community that might be able to help support more directly.
Thank you. And I'll say to everyone that's watching, if you want to get connected with either of our panelists or CARE New York, you need further assistance, contact any of us. You can message us privately, or you can make your comment below stating that you need some assistance. And if you want assistance from APNA or Engage, let us know and we will connect you with the appropriate party as you request. And if you have any questions right now, please write them down so that we can do our best to answer them right now. And so while we're waiting on questions, inshallah, I want to go to each of you and just talk a little bit about your background. I want to know, number one, how did each of you get into this work? And why are you doing this work? Why are you doing this? You're very talented sisters. You could be doing almost anything else in the world. Why are you in the nonprofit sector working for your communities specifically?
Okay.
You want to go, Iram?
Okay, sure. So basically, Alhamdulillah, I'm Muslim and I'm from Pakistan. I'm an attorney by profession. So UPNA, we started a social adult daycare center. So when we started back in 2016, in a neighborhood of Brighton Beach in Brooklyn, New York, we realized that our community is kind of not aware about many of their benefits, many services, many programs. There is no representation, particularly in this neighborhood, in this district. So we started working in terms of forming a not-for-profit organization, a community center from where we can bridge this gap and we can link our community with the appropriate resources. And this is what we have done in the last 3-4 years. And so far, alhamdulillah, we are able to partner with many, many big organizations like CARE, Engage, NHS Brooklyn, Grow Brooklyn. We are partnered with Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs in terms of many different services. So we are able to bring all those services back in our community, and there's a huge need of the community. So while going into the flow of bringing more resources to the community, we realized that census is the very important thing in which our community should participate. And as per the last census of 2010, Brighton Beach is the hardest to count community in the borough of Brooklyn. So that is like my say in terms of, yes, so if our community is not representative properly, I know the numbers are not accurate, so this is the right time we should work on. And our faith also says that we have to help our members. So Islam believes on helping each other, helping everybody regardless of their faith, their nationality, their religion, their race. So that's what something inbuilt in us. So we cannot compromise with that. So whenever we feel like there is something, okay, alhamdulillah, we are into it.
Alhamdulillah. That's excellent. Thank you so much. And you brought up, what your faith kind of teaches you about giving back to others. I really appreciate you saying that. That's beautiful. And may you continue to do that work successfully. Sister Please, the floor is yours.
Oh, so I come from a public health background. I'd worked in policy and public health issues. And one of the biggest things I saw was there was lack of data on our community. People would ask me, is there any data on the Muslim community? We want to support them. Is there anything you can make the case for? And the data was just so poor. And on the second side, I'm also highly civically engaged locally. I sit on a community board, as does Iram, I know. And you can see like how, the reality is not that sometimes government is choosing not to give funding to certain communities. The fact is that the government doesn't have the numbers to make the case to give funding to our communities, right? And so we have a stronger voice and a stronger advocacy effort to, by doing so. So the census was something I felt like was a wonderful opportunity to help really organize and support all of our community organizations that are really doing important on the ground work, like Apanayas and with Iram and all the folks that are there, but all these other organizations to help support them to make sure they understood, how to help best do so and any kind of support we could do. And then to bring it back to, the faith, what's been interesting, there was a group of a Muslim and other interfaith group that created an interfaith toolkit, and they give hadiths from our Prophet Muhammad's time that talked about the fact that we need to, the hadiths, and I'm not quoting because I don't have it right in front of me, but I remember the essence was essentially that we need to have a count of people so we know who's here, so we know who to help. Right? Who is ill, who is not. And that really struck me because the reality is these we do believe in zakat, we do believe in supporting the community, we help the community grow, and we need to know who's here so that we can support him. And it's part of our faith.
Absolutely. I support everything you just said. That's amazing. I hope that, the one thing I took out of this also is that it sounds like I need to get on a community board.
Definitely.
Services on the census and into your communities as well. You're both, excellent role models for our community, here in New York and beyond. So amazing. I hope you continue that work. I want to go back. We have a question that's coming up through our attendees. I was hoping we can get some clarification on it, which is really, when it comes to college students, a lot of colleges have canceled semesters. So how closely, or should they be worried, for instance, if they, in the census, get counted with their parents' address, right? Is that a concern? Or is it just a preference to say, count your address in your college and not necessarily where you live with your parents?
So here I would say, as I mentioned before, for the college students, so they have to calculate that in a particular year, how much time they have spent in their college campus and how much time they are staying with their parents. So whichever place has more number of period for them, number of days for them where they were physically living and sleeping, so they have to complete their census form by considering their individual scenarios.
So even if they're staying at their parents' house and they spend more time at college campus, they can go online and put their address in to be counted for their college campus. Yes. Apartment or dorm. And in even that, we have a lot of folks here in New York City that maybe young professionals that can work remotely have left their home to go stay with family in Westchester or wherever else they go. The fact is they are still technically living, other than this sort of short period of the pandemic, they technically live most of the time elsewhere, and they should count for that area.
Yes.
So, right, okay. So it's an individual decision. What they should do is ask themselves, correct me if I'm wrong, where do I live? You have to be at your parents' home today because of the pandemic doesn't decide the question. The question is, where do you live? Yeah. And that's the that you should be using. For college students, our families live in Brooklyn, but I go to college in Buffalo, upstate. I should be using Buffalo because that's where I live normally.
Yeah. Yes.
This is an extended, very boring vacation to sit. You don't get to go out. You have to stay indoors. You need to stay indoors. For the security of the entire Ummah, of the entire community here in New York City and beyond. So that's really important. So before we wrap this up, I want to give the opportunity for each of you to kind of have your parting message to our community. whatever it may be. Asya, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned from this experience was that when the first census happened was in like late 1700s, George Washington thought that there was an undercount of Americans. There was only 3.9 million, and he said that there has to be more than 4 million. And that number was important because he wanted Europe to be scared of America and know that there were a lot of us. We're here, and I say that. As Muslims, the census is not something that we should be scared of. It's our opportunity to show that we are here. We are an important part of the fabric of America. We live here, we work here, we go to school here. And this is our way to have our voice and advocate for our community, both Muslim and non-Muslim communities where we live and stay. And this is our opportunity.
Yes. Okay, so I will add on this is that the census is only 10 minutes and it's only 10 questions and it's going to determine our next 10 years of life in New York City, in USA basically. And apart from that, it's very easy, simple, and there are various organizations out there to help you out in filling out your census surveys. It is a right opportunity for us is that our numbers are not accurate. Our numbers are not counted properly. So this is a right opportunity for us to get a fair share of funding and as well as make our all numbers corrected, make our all numbers straight on record.
Yeah, and I just want to say as a closing remarks here that if you learned anything from this webinar, we have repeatedly stressed the importance of the census. Over and over again, we've heard all three of us talk about funding, right? Because we, as an organization, as a community, as a city, as a state, require funding to provide services for civilians who live here, right? So it's really important that every single year when there is a budget, the US government, the federal government releases billions and billions of dollars. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars to states. The way the allocations happen is through the census. And so we want to make sure that New York City, that New York State is counted 100%. Right now, because of the density issues, because of everybody lives in apartment complexes, New York City is one of the hardest places to count, especially Brooklyn, right? So it's important for you to do your part. If you want halal meals in your schools, if you want good public schools, because they have to get funded in order for us to get teachers.
Yes.
If you want to have a stronger voice, if you want a bigger political voice, a more powerful voice, if you want more representatives, if you want to maintain your representatives in Congress, right? You need to do the census because that's going to determine how many representatives we get as citizens of the state of New York, right? I want to be really clear about this. We've said it all along, all three of us were very unanimous. The census needs to count everyone. If you have a one-day-old child who's born on March 30th or March 31st, they need to count on the census, right? If you have someone who's living with you as undocumented, someone who is here, who's an immigrant, green card holder, visa holder of any kind, they count, they need to count. They live here, the city spends resources on them, the state spends money on them, and we need the federal government to do the same. We need to know where our people are. We need to be able to tell our community, tell the governor, senators, the representatives, the mayors, that we have a strong and vibrant community. And the only way we get to do that is if the census does their job. We have to come together, complete the census. Please do it. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, please contact any of our organizations. I want to thank Engage for their important work that they're doing and the amazing PowerPoint that Sister Asya presented to us. And of course, APNA, Brooklyn Community Center. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. Please continue doing that work. And I hope that the community who's watching today really shows both of your organizations and support. I wish all of you the best of luck. Please stay indoors. Please stay healthy. And maintain social distancing so that we can go about the world in a safe manner. And I cannot wait to get some sunshine.
Definitely.
this spring weather that's about to hit us. So let's stay indoors. Let's destroy this epidemic. That way we can go about our lives as normal as possible. Thank you so much. Look forward to doing this again in the future. Have a good day.
You
Thank
too.
you, everyone.